Hello, and welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I am going to be talking about Matt Reeves' The Batman, which I finally got to see. Now, for those of you guys who have been kind of following the Batman news like myself, and you guys know that this movie was supposed to be released last year in 2021, and then it was subsequently pushed out to March 2022, and I think it was one of maybe a few times that this was pushed out, and it had us just on the edge, just waiting for this movie to come out, and now it's finally here, guys. Now, it is a movie that I am not going to go into spoiler details for obvious reasons. I want you guys to see it and experience for yourself. So I was actually able to catch the fan premiere for The Batman, which was 3 days earlier than the actual release. So I am actually doing this review on March 1st. And I know a lot of people actually got to review this movie and watch it last week on Friday, and the embargo was lifted on Monday. So reviews have been out, and I think my opinion is going to get lost in the flood of reviews out there, and it's probably going to be the same thing, just kind of praising or maybe not praising this movie. Who knows? I haven't gotten to the review yet. But yeah, this movie is very exciting. I was anticipating this much like everyone else, and because of all the delays and things, it just made it that much harder. We were all sort of edging for this movie, and now it's finally in front of us. That's insane. It's crazy. It feels, I don't know, it feels like it was more built up than No Way Home for me in a lot of ways, because No Way Home was something I was very much anticipating and had a lot of hype going into it, but we all kind of knew what was going to be revealed in that. We kind of all knew the underlying secrets. This movie was sort of shrouded in mystery. For The Batman, this is a completely new universe, so it's a completely new mystery that we're, well, a mystery in more than one way, but it's a mystery for the audience members to kind of go into, sort of figuring out what we like about this new version of the Batman and this new Batverse. And sorry. Before I get into the review, I just want to thank you guys so much for getting me to 600 subscribers. I'm really thankful for that. I know that videos have been sort of slow, and you're probably just waiting for me to get in the review, but I just really wanted to take this time to say thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I was actually having probably one of the worst days this year, and I got to see The Batman, and I got 600 subscribers. And that's just awesome. Two things that kind of cheered me up, and yeah, I'm just very thankful. So again, thank you guys so much. Anyways, let's get into the review. It's not going to be spoiler filled at all. I will say some things that if you are just someone who wants to go completely blind in the movie, have no opinions on characters, or just very minor plot details, then do not watch this. I suggest, like myself, I don't like getting any sort of opinions. I don't even like seeing a Rotten Tomatoes score. That's how far removed I like to be before I watch a movie. So if you are like that, please just watch this movie after you're done watching the movie. Or watch this review after you're done watching the movie. That's what I mean. So thank you, and be very aware of that, okay? Now, getting into the review. So I took some notes in my head, and as you know, notes in your head, they just go away. They just fade like fairy dust. So I will just talk very briefly about some of the things I really dug about this movie, and then I'll get into some things that maybe I didn't love, but some of those things might be spoilery, so I'll be very vague about it, okay? Cool. So one of the most talked about things about this movie is obviously the casting. We all knew Matt Reeves had a reputation for making fantastic movies. If you guys have never seen the Apes movies, or at least the two movies that he directed, then you guys are missing out. Caesar is real, okay? I really wanted to do videos on the Planet of the Apes movies before this, but then I was like, that is a monumental task, and it is way too busy on my end outside of this. So didn't do that, but those movies are incredible. He's done the Cloverfield movie, and he's also done the movie Let Me In. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that was the remake of Let the Right One In, and I heard it's incredible. It's one of his movies I have not yet seen, but this guy just has a phenomenal track record of making great films, and I am just so excited that he got an IP that I have been devoted to for most of my life. So it's incredible, okay? It's incredible, but let's talk about the casting, okay? We'll praise Matt Reeves a little bit later, but let's talk about his choice in casting. I've heard some very divisive things about casting, especially some of the older Batman movies, but I think we're coming into a day and age where we're a lot more forgiving and a lot more trusting in casting directors to make the right decision. And this is kind of an example, because I feel like Robert Pattinson being cast as Batman, you know, it was a little bit of an uproar, but wasn't that much. And I think a lot of people have been paying attention to a lot of his indie projects that he's been doing. For myself, I felt like a lot of people weren't that crazy or upset about Robert Pattinson being cast as the Batman. Now, maybe there are some people who have only seen, you know, the Twilight movies and they pass judgment that way. But honestly, that I feel like that's just such a small minority of people who are actually rooting for Robert Pattinson as Batman. I, for one, was very impressed with all of his past work. And even the Twilight movies, I was like, you know what? I feel like the guy didn't even want to be in those movies, and I knew he was too good to be in those movies in the first place, along with Kristen Stewart. So yeah, a lot of the people in those movies didn't want to be in them. They probably just needed a foothold so that they can, jumpstart their career. So that's kind of what happens with a lot of younger actors. And so for Robert Pattinson, I was very forgiving, and I realized I wasn't the only one. If anything, I think there was a majority of people who were actually rooting for him when he was cast. And I believe it was between him and Nicholas Hoult. And I'm very, very glad that they chose Robert Pattinson. I mean, not only does the guy have the jawline for Batman, and he just looks like he jumped out of like a, not Frank Miller novel. I feel like Frank Miller's version is Ben Affleck. I feel like Ben Affleck is Frank Miller's The Dark Knight. But I feel like this is like a Jim Lee drawing come to life. He just looks so incredible. Or maybe like a Greg Capullo. Like he just looks like Batman. I love the Batsuit. Now I'll kind of get into that very minor. It's not a huge part of the movie, but the Batsuit is incredible. But Robert Pattinson as Batman is very imposing, and he also plays a very distraught and very dark version of the character. And I know Matt Reeves intentionally based his version of Bruce Wayne or Batman off of Kurt Cobain, and it's definitely prevalent in this movie. I mean, even the Nirvana soundtrack is prevalent in this movie. You hear it, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times in this. It's as much a theme for the character of Bruce Wayne as it is the theme for Michael Giacchino for the Batman. I feel that the Nirvana theme or the Nirvana soundtrack in this movie is sort of Bruce Wayne's theme, and the theme for the Batman is Michael Giacchino's. So you kind of get that duality where there's this darkness and there's this triumph in Michael Giacchino's, but then you also get this solemn and somber and kind of dark and thought-provoking version of the song from Nirvana for Bruce Wayne. And it's really interesting how they integrate that all together. And maybe I'm throwing out way too many theories in terms of sound or whatever, or music association to these characters, but it just works. It just definitely works, and it drives Robert Pattinson as the character, and it really does feel thematically correct that Robert Pattinson was chose to be the Batman. Because Robert Pattinson was sort of the underdog going into this movie. I know many people were supportive of him, but he himself, taking on such a huge IP, sort of is kind of his journey as the Batman in this. He's sort of the underdog in terms of the people aren't trusting of him. I mean, the GCPD look at him like he's a freak. He's as much a villain to them as, the Riddler is. They don't really trust him, but they know that Gordon sides with him and that Gordon trusts him. And because Gordon is, I think, a lieutenant at the time, he is sort of, just associated to someone who has higher authority. So, of course, they just kind of have to bend to their will. So that's a very interesting angle of this movie that I really, really love. And I feel that Robert Pattinson, just in his eyes, you can kind of see the conflict and you can kind of see the judgment, and it feels like it's getting to him, but he has to like puff his chest out a little bit, and he has to kind of just pile drive through it and just has to focus on what his mission is and focus on the detective story of all of this and start looking for clues. And that is one thing that I think Matt Reeves did brilliantly. And this has to do with both Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves working together with this character, is that this is a detective story in and out. You can call it a noir, you can call it an allusion to Seven, David Fincher 7, or you could call it, a reference to maybe Hush or Year One. It's all of those things in one, and I think it's just brilliantly done. And there are so many times in this movie where I just went, wow, we're not seeing a lot of Bruce Wayne. We're seeing a lot of Batman, which is something you couldn't say about some of the other movies, where it felt maybe like 65% the Batman, and then you'd get like 35% of Bruce Wayne's story. But this one, it really felt like you get like maybe 85% of the movie as Batman, and you rarely see him without his cowl. And Robert Pattinson's version of Batman in this is just a guy who's 100% Batman all the time. Even without the cowl, he's just constantly obsessed about being a vigilante, obsessed about bringing justice, but he's driven by vengeance and rage. And these are all things that sort of make the character a little bit more complex. And I guess you could say that about some of the other characters, but in this one, it really does feel like this is a Year 2 Batman. And this is a Year 2 Batman. This story takes place 2 years into Batman being Batman, and this is still him sort of gaining the trust of the people around him. Everyone still calls him a vigilante. The civilians don't even really know who he is, but they can't really trust him. And he has a wonderful arc in this movie, which I won't go into any details about, but there are just certain things about the growth of this character that you observe as an audience member, and you're like, yes, you feel happy. You feel happy for the growth and the journey that this character goes through. And that's all due to Robert Pattinson's powerful performance. So, enough praise for that. I feel like if I keep going, it's going to go into spoiler territory, so I'll just hold off. But let's talk about Selina Kyle, Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. Now, a lot of people have very strong opinions about Catwoman. Some people prefer Michelle Pfeiffer's version. Some people like Halle Berry's version. And I think those people are currently in Arkham Asylum. Maybe there are some fans. I doubt it, but maybe there are. Then there's also Eartha Kitt's version of Catwoman, and I think there's just going to be so many people saying, this is my Catwoman, this is my Catwoman. Well, you know what? There can be many, and I think Zoe Kravitz absolutely kills it in this. I think she's very excellent. I think she bounces off well off of Robert Pattinson. I think they have very excellent chemistry. There are some moments where I feel like there were some forced lines for her character and some forced developments. I won't go into any details, but I feel like I got to see it again because I don't know if you guys saw the pictures that I showed you guys of the fan premiere, but I'm literally on seat 24, which is the very end at like row 3 or 4 in front of a huge IMAX screen. So I was literally sitting like this the entire time. I had to bend my neck, and the guy next to me was on his cell phone the entire time, and there were like little kids just running over my legs, and it was probably the worst way I could see the movie, but I was just happy to be there. But anyways, that experience aside, Catwoman was pretty incredible in this. I think that her character is just something that I wasn't expecting to get too invested in her story. I thought she was going to sort of plop in and come out and, sort of antagonize Batman, but sort of be the love interest. But she actually plays a critical role in the story. And I think this movie could actually be broken up into 3 different stories that you get. And I think that's something brilliant. I feel like this movie can be broken into 3 different acts in terms of how the story is structured and how the mystery unfolds, because the mystery as a whole is still a mystery. But through there, you get 3 different developments, and you also get 3 different arcs being sort of satisfied. And I think that's really great. And I won't tell you which characters get those arcs, but you do get it, and you get those developments. You get a Catwoman that feels like she was plucked out of Batman Year One, but you also get a blend of her that feels a little bit like it's alluding to, I don't know, like a early Batman Returns. It just feels like a marriage of all of them, but also a very grounded version of Catwoman that I think a new age or a new era or generation of Batman fans can really look up to. And I think it's a character that we can see in the future and expect to grow with that character and learn more about them. And that's another brilliant thing about this movie, is that I think this is part of Matt Reeves' vision, but this is really an origin story for all of these characters. I mean, all villains included, as well as our protagonist, Batman. This is sort of a coming of age for all of these characters. They're all fairly young. They're probably in their late 20s, early 30s or something like that, sort of coming into the career of, either crime or being a vigilante. And it's very interesting to see that angle, and I really like it. It's a way to get an origin story without having to do the origin story, because how many times we need to see Bruce Wayne's parents get shot? I mean, I'd see it again. Why not? But maybe in like a deleted scene. I don't need it in the movie, because we know the emotional impact that this is having on all the characters, particularly Alfred and Bruce Wayne. Zoe Kravitz's version of Catwoman comes off very vulnerable as well as very strong and seductive. And it's that balance of Catwoman's character that you have to really toe that line of. And I think Zoe Kravitz's face does a lot of the work in terms of, Emmy means seductive, I guess. And I don't want to say certain people have seductive faces, because that's saying that's an invitation to be seduced. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying some people have very sultry looking faces, very provocative. I don't know, in a respectful way is what I'm saying. I don't know what it is, but she just has a face, like Elisa Bonet. I mean, that's her mom, but like Elisa Bonet, where it's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that person is Catwoman, just visually. And I think it just works. I think she just makes it work. That's all I'm going to say about Catwoman. But yeah, some very interesting developments for that character in the movie, and that's all I'll say. But yeah, next, let's talk about Alfred. Very little with Alfred, and I know a lot of these movies, or at least all the Batman movies or the Dark Knight trilogy, there's a big focus on Bruce Wayne's relationship with Alfred, and Alfred is a huge part of Batman's life. In this movie, their relationship is strained. It's very established very early on that these two don't really get along in the same way that Michael Caine's Batman and Christian Bale, or Michael Caine's Alfred and Christian Bale's Batman kind of had that like cohort and sort of banter between the two. You can feel that Bruce is like on a mission, and Alfred is definitely not on board, but he has to help him because this guy is crazy. And it seems very closely similar to the way that Ben Affleck's version of Batman and Jeremy Irons' version of Alfred were. Sort of like that, but less supportive, more strained. And it definitely feels like that was something that maybe was in the prequel comic, which I haven't read yet. But yeah, there are some things there where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why we have that. But you can kind of just put the pieces together, and we don't need to be handheld for why the relationship is strained. You can kind of just see it as a father figure seeing their son go down a dark path, and, you know, the son's like, you know, I'm just doing my own thing. I'm doing this for a good cause. But the father's just worrying about his son's safety. That's kind of all you need. And it's established really well. And Andy Serkis is really great in the small moments that he gets in this movie. I will say, if you're looking for a lot of Alfred in your Batman movie, this probably isn't it. I think he's in it for about maybe 10 minutes total of screen time, maybe even less. But in the time that he has, it's very, very powerful, and it's very, very strong. And I won't tell you what developments between Bruce's character and Alfred happened, but when they happened, I was just like, wow, this is great. I wish we got more, but you can't ask for more of that when the movie's already 3 hours, and you feel like the 3 hours really does go by fast. It felt like I was in there for like 2.5 hours. But yeah, you can't ask the audience to stay a little bit longer. I mean, you can ask me, but not a general audience to stay longer for a little bit more of those scenes when you don't really need them. They did what they could with that 8 minutes to 10 minutes of Alfred, and I think it was lovely. So Andy Serkis, phenomenal, really great. I'm not going to go do like a ranking video of like my favorite Alfreds or my favorite Batmans. Maybe that will be a separate video. But if I had to place him, I'd say he's pretty close to the top. He's pretty close to the top. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say. Now let's talk about another character that shows up in the movie very little, but when they're on screen, it's like there's nothing else going on the screen. You're just glued to that character, and that is Colin Farrell as Penguin. Colin Farrell as Penguin, we all watched the trailers and we were all like, oh man, that is just, who the hell is that? That guy should be in more movies. Well, it's Colin Farrell. He is unrecognizable in this movie. You've heard this before. You're going to hear it again. And yes, this guy is most like, or not this guy, but the makeup artist for Colin Farrell in this movie is definitely going to get an Oscar. I mean, literally throughout this movie, there's not one moment where I'm like, yeah, he slipped up there. Yeah, he almost had me, but that's Colin Farrell. No, at no moment in this movie where am I like, yeah, that's Colin Farrell at all. That guy just disappears. His voice is unrecognizable. He sounds like he was plucked out of like Goodfellas. Like, this character is so just mob bossy, and the way he inflects his words just feels like he was taken right out of Batman the Animated Universe, but in a way that is grounded, in a way that exists in this world, in a way that doesn't feel too hokey. And I just love it. He's sort of a cartoony villain in this. I don't want to say hams it up. He doesn't ham it up. He does to a certain degree, but in a way where you're like, yeah, that's like your weird uncle who also, you know, sells drugs. I don't know how else to say it, but his version of Penguin is not really honorable to, you know, the version of Penguin that maybe we recognize from the comics, but it's a version that feels grounded and feels like it would be something out of like a Brian Azzarello comic, where it's just a version of Penguin that feels like something you might see in a very dark and twisted version of our reality. Not too far off, not too ultra real like Christopher Nolan's, but real enough to be like, okay, this exists in this world and that's okay. And it's incredible. It's just, he toes the line perfectly. Like, it's a version where you're like, yeah, this could totally play off in the world, I guess. They would be weird as hell. They would definitely stick out, but yeah, I could see someone being like this. And Colin Farrell, yeah, like I said, is unrecognizable. His banner with Batman is hilarious. I think he's one of the standouts. I think he actually does bring the most comedy to this movie. So if you're looking for levity in this movie, which there is few and far between, but there is levity enough to make you go, okay, this movie does have humor in it. And he brings a lot of it. And I can't say more enough about it. Colin Farrell, excellent. Cannot wait to see him in more movies. Now let's talk about Jim Gordon. I think Jeffrey Wright was an excellent choice as Jim Gordon. For me, my favorite is always going to be Gary Oldman's version of Jim Gordon. I think he's just the pinnacle of what Jim Gordon can be. And I think that Jeffrey Wright is a very, very close second. I think his screen time with Batman is definitely something that most people are going to be talking about because they are together for a majority of this movie. I'd say 50% of this movie is just Batman and Jim Gordon solving crimes. doing detective shit, and it's awesome. It's so fun. It's just like, it feels like you're taking it straight out of the comics or the TV shows, and just feels like you're watching something unfold in front of your eyes that you've been waiting for your entire life. And it's just great. It's just great comic book or noir goodness. I just really love their dynamic, where it's just they're both on a mission to solve the case, but they don't really know much about each other. I think Batman knows definitely a lot more about Jim, but he doesn't care too much about getting to know Jim. I really love their relationship, because in this movie, Jim is someone who knows nothing about Batman, but you can tell that deep down he just has a gut feeling that he is doing the right thing and that he should trust this guy. And amongst everyone else who's telling him not to trust this vigilante, he just knows deep down that this guy has a heart that is trying to protect the city. And Batman just knows that he's a good cop, and he trusts him. And I don't know, there's just something about a relationship where you can't see it, by face value and look at it and be like, yeah, these two should hang out. But when they're together, you just know something clicks. You know that they're just kind of meant to be partners. It's kind of this unspoken union, because we really just jump into the relationship right when the movie starts. It's already established that these guys have probably been working together for about maybe a year or more. Everyone else is skeptical about them working together and bringing Batman onto crime scenes. But, Jim's just like, yeah, whatever, He's gonna help us. Like, this guy has helped us out in the past. He's gonna do it again. You just know that there's a history there that we don't really need to see, even though I really wish I could see it. But we've already had movies kind of establishing that. We had the Dark Knight trilogy, so we don't really need that again. But damn it, would I love to see that. I think it would be really cool. But yeah, we are jumping right into 2 years of them working together, or at least a year. So yeah, keep that in mind. You might feel like it's a little bit jarring because you're used to them sort of meeting each other for the first time if you have grown up with the Dark Knight trilogy, but this is really just a completely new version of Batman in the Batverse that we're being introduced to, and I kind of really liked it. I really liked their relationship, and I think that Jeffrey Wright is a perfect choice for Gordon, and I can't wait to see this character grow. And I think back, maybe because Batman Begins and that version of Gordon was someone who I just felt had a very great warmth to him, and he also had a family, and there were all things that kind of make this character likable. I would say one thing about Jeffrey Wright's version is you don't really get any background on him. He's just sort of there as a lieutenant or whatever position he is, but we just know that he works with Batman and that he's a good cop. But I think the characterization of him is something that maybe we can look forward to more development of, and that's all I'll say. So yeah, excellently done, Jeffrey Wright, amazing. I think you guys are all waiting though for one of the last characters I want to highlight, but I will mention Carmine Falcone, played by John Turturro. Definitely don't sleep on him, because I think this is one of John Turturro's most interesting roles. John Turturro as Carmine Falcone is an inspired choice. He's not the version of Carmine Falcone that I was expecting, but he is the one that I am glad came to play. I think this is one of John Turturro's best performances. I think when he's on screen, he's someone who has this magnetism to him, and it's probably because we're used to seeing him in like goofy roles, or we're used to seeing him in like The Big Lebowski or the Transformers movies, or maybe even Do the Right Thing, where he's playing someone who's sort of elevated and sort of goofy and racist as well. Let's not forget that and Do the Right Thing. But in this one, he's very calm, and there's a sort of menace, and there's this sort of like snakish quality of him. And he has these sunglasses, so we never really can read his eyes. And I think that's a really very great and inspired choice by the costume designer to keep him consistently with his eyes behind sunglasses, because we can't really read the character. And I think that really works for the edge of Carmine Falcone, and maybe kind of distances ourselves from the association that we have with John Turturro and other films. And I think he's just very great in this movie. So I give him a lot of praise, because he didn't get a lot of coverage in some of the trailers. So maybe very minimal, or maybe in some of the TV spots, but we got very minimal reactions of John Turturro, and I think it was because they wanted to save that for the movie, and I'm really glad they did. So yeah, excellent job. So anyways, let's get into what you guys all want to hear about, which is the villain, the Riddler. Paul Dano is an actor who, if you guys have seen There Will Be Blood, and I think everyone's going to praise that performance, he is the unspoken second crown in that movie, right next to Daniel Day-Lewis. And if you guys have never seen Little Miss Sunshine, Little Miss Sunshine, he is excellent in that movie. This guy has been dishing out great performances. He was in Swiss Army Man, and that movie is goofy as hell, and he grounded it, and he made me, I think, cry when I watched that movie. I don't remember if I was crying or if I was laughing. I was probably doing both. But Paul Dano is just a huge talent. And when he's in this movie, when he's interacting with Batman, And when we get that confrontation between them, I would just say it was so well built up, and I'm really glad they did it, but I couldn't remove myself from the fact that it felt so similar to the confrontation between Batman and Joker in The Dark Knight. That's all I'll say about that, but there are very striking similarities between it where I kind of had to switch my brain off and be like, okay, forget about the Dark Knight trilogy. This is this movie. And when you do that detachment, Paul Dano is putting out a really great performances, and he's not just like this weird silent creep. He gets into this kind of mood swing where he just feels that he's compelled to just shout and go really loud with it. So expect a version of the Riddler where you can't really predict where his emotions are going to go, but he never has any outbursts. He just has little unhinged moments. Paul Dano's version of Riddler in this is based off of Zodiac, and I think that was confirmed by Matt Reeves himself. And you'll know that because he leaves all these cryptic messages, and the way that they sort of integrate riddles into real world serial killers is a very smart choice. And I think that the Riddler being played up as a little bit more grounded, as something that's, sort of like the Zodiac killer, but his own thing in his own way, is a really inspired choice. And I know some people are going to have some opinions on the costume, but really in this universe, when you get into it, the costume doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because this is a proto version of Riddler. This is, in his way, his origin story. This is him sort of getting his footings, and he is using riddles at the very beginning, and that is a trademark of the Riddler. I mean, it's his damn name, but it's not really about him getting into these flamboyant costumes or anything like that. This is him sort of setting the groundwork. Like I said earlier, this movie is a origin story for a lot of these characters, including the Riddler. And if you guys have problems with his costume, then take it up with the costume department. But really, it doesn't have that much of an impact on your enjoyment of the movie. If you were someone who wanted, if you're like a diehard Riddler fan and you wanted him in the question mark suit or whatever, this isn't the movie for you. But I think you should have known that going in. And if you do go in with that knowledge and realize that this is an origin story for him, and that this costume really isn't his costume, it's sort of just his introduction to the world as Riddler, then I think you'll feel a lot more solace going into the movie. And I really enjoyed this version. Paul Dano definitely kills it when he is in the Riddler suit. I think that's when he's his most creepiest. I think he does something with his voice that makes him very imposing, but also kind of meek at the same time. He toes the line like a lot of these villains do, where he comes off as very insecure, but also very strong and courageous in his own way. Like in a very dark and sadistic way, he comes off it and sees himself as this hero over Gotham. And I think that's a very cool angle that they took with this, like this cult mentality that starts to begin to pollute Gotham because of Riddler and the things that he's doing to the people in the city. So that's a very cool angle, and that's all I'll say about that. Paul Dano does a really great job. There are some things and some choices that he makes in the latter half of the movie that I was like, not huge on. It's not a detriment to the performance or the movie as a whole, but there were just some things that didn't quite land for me. But Paul Dano as a whole, and Paul Dano as the Riddler himself, fantastic. And yeah, that's all I'll say. Just some minor things, just some very minor things. But if out of all the characters that felt like, some of their performances may have gone a little bit too far, just for myself, maybe just that character. There's just this looming presence of the Riddler throughout this film. You just feel that he's always watching, and I think that's the greatest moment that we actually get with the Riddler is when he's actually not there, but you can kind of just tell he's watching from the background. And I think that's where he's his strongest. I think Paul Dano's version of the Riddler is a performance that you are going to remember. I think his presence in the movie is felt a lot more when he's actually not there. I think that's when he's his most imposing and intimidating, in my opinion. But when we actually physically see him on screen, I feel that some of the gravitas kind of dissipates a little bit, but you guys let me know how you feel about that. But I think the mystery behind the character is the most intriguing thing about the character of the Riddler. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say, because I feel like if I keep talking, I'm going to gush and I'm going to say something that I really wish I didn't say. So that's all I'm going to say. But yeah, Paul Dano as Riddler, awesome. Can't wait for you guys to see him. And don't take that as like a negative for the character at all. The character is the antagonist of this movie. He is the villain. He is, it's a high bar that Heath Ledger put up, and I don't think it's fair to compare anyone to Heath Ledger's Joker. But the presence that this villain feels throughout the movie, or makes you feel throughout this movie, is right up there with Joker, I think. At least his presence. Performance is really up to you guys. You guys let me know when you see the movie. So yeah, I didn't really want to talk too much about some of the particular things about this movie, because if I do, then I feel like I'm going to spoiler territory, and maybe I will do a spoiler review, but I feel like this is sufficient enough for you guys. So let me know what you guys thought of the movie. I hope you guys enjoy it when you see it. I think this movie is fantastic. I think it stands on its own as something that could potentially be as great and as memorable as the Dark Knight trilogy. I think Matt Reeves is doing an excellent job in this universe, and I cannot wait to see more of it. I think Robert Pattinson's version of the Batman is definitely going to be someone's, Michael Keaton Batman. I think it's going to be up there with Bale's Batman for sure for me. But I need to see it again. I cannot wait to see it again, because those seats sucked. Those seats sucked, and I really feel like I saw like a warped version of the movie. I feel like I was watching a version of the movie where all the characters' heads were like way bigger on this side, and then they started to get smaller on that. It's just obviously because I was watching it at an angle, but I feel like I didn't really get to experience the amazing cinematography of this movie, and Michael Giacchino's score was incredible, but I was at a weird angle where the music sounded like it was coming from over here, and I didn't really get that surround sound version. But just to let you guys know, yeah, there's more I can talk about this movie, but damn it. Okay, I'll say it. So the action choreography, incredible. It's just incredible. It just is. But you guys got to see it for yourself. And the cinematography, amazing. It's just, some of the best cinematography I've seen in a movie for a superhero in I'd say probably ever. I think this is some of the best cinematography for a superhero film that I have seen, at least in the past 5 or 10 years. And it just looks flawless. The use of shadows, the use of light, the use of dawn, and so good. Greig Fraser's cinematography on this is some of the best I've ever seen. That guy is a legend. It's something to definitely look forward to. If you guys are a fan of just visuals, I think this movie is a treat in itself. And that on top of the goddamn score by Michael Giacchino is so great. The Riddler's theme is incredible. Selina's theme in this, incredible. The Batman's theme in this, incredible. The use of Nirvana in this, just inspired and amazing. Okay, so enough about the score, choreography, and cinematography. I think that's everything I can say about the movie without going into spoilers. And yes, I've been rambling, and yes, this is my second version of me ending this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember to like the video if you liked it, and remember to subscribe. I'm stuttering right now. Remember to subscribe to my channel if you guys enjoyed videos like this and you want to see more. And yeah, look forward to more videos coming soon. And thank you guys for making my day. Like I said, I started the day off pretty miserable. It was just not a great day. And seeing some of these things happen, like seeing 600 subs and seeing this movie, it was just a joy. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, guys. And as always, guys, I will see you later.